You don't have to be lonely at farmersonly.com.
Well, hello. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, founder and podcast producer at Max Podcasting, and you can reach me at max@maxpodcasting.com for help bringing your podcast to life and using it as a business building tool. This is episode 124, and today's guest is Jerry Miller, the founder of FarmersOnly.com. Yes, FarmersOnly.com, one of the most incredible stories you'll ever hear. In this interview, we talked about the famous commercials, the famous jingle, the famous site that has helped the lives of millions of members, and we get Jerry's thoughts on marketing, breaking through the clutter, and even some of his favorite commercials from other brands. It's FarmersOnly.com. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Jerry Miller, the founder of FarmersOnly.com. Jerry, such a pleasure to have you. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing great as well. This is really, really cool. I mean, I remember so much buzz that was created with your commercials and the jingle and the brand that you've created. And now the fact that it's expanded to millions and millions of members is just incredible. I distinctly remember first time discovering about farmersonly.com growing up. So this is really surreal. Also, both of us hailing from Northeast Ohio, this was a perfect match here. Before we get into the Farmers Only story, before you started FarmersOnly.com, you worked in the marketing agency world. How was your experience there?
It's been great. I've been in advertising marketing now for over 40 years. I've seen a lot and done a lot. You can imagine working with, hundreds of different types of projects, but Farmers Only, I always said here I am making other people successful. And then I came up with my own idea, Farmers Only, and that took off the biggest. So
You made yourself successful as well.
it was a passion. It was fun. So
What was your favorite part about marketing in the first place?
I think it was a good match for me because when I was in school, I did this testing and they said I tested extremely high in math abilities, but then I also got a scholarship in art for based on creativity. And I remember my guidance counselor saying, actually, those are like almost opposites. That's unusual because people that have a high IQ in math are so structured, it's hard for them to be creative, because you're always thinking inside the box. Advertising marketing actually was the perfect field for me because you use math abilities of figuring out what the right demo is, how many times do you reach them. You're using television, radio, reach and frequency, and, a lot of numbers, right? But then you get into the advertising part. What is the message? And that's where you have to get creative. And I've always followed a simple rule that I read in this book like 30, 40 years ago. It said, it was Recent Trout, Positioning the Battle for Your Mind. It said that the average, now this is again years ago, it said the average person's bombarded by, at that time, 400 or 500 messages a day, but only a few messages break through the clutter. You have to figure out a way to be one of those messages that break through. So everything I did for hundreds of different clients, I always use that formula. How do I break through the clutter? And I know with your podcast, Wild Business Growth, you have a lot of entrepreneurs listening that follow you. Entrepreneurs always come up with great ideas. But when you're trying to reach people, if you have what I call the blah, blah, blah message, you can spend a fortune and nobody even pays attention to your message. And that's why a lot of people fail. So I've always tried to break through the clutter from day one in broadcast and advertising.
And that's so key in the marketing world and the entrepreneurship world to actually break through that clutter to get your idea, get your passion out. That's one of the things that's fascinated me about this world is how it is really right brain and left brain. And as you said, it's creativity and it's math, which is why for the rest of this interview, I'm just going to throw a bunch of very complicated math problems at you.
Okay.
We could do that if you want.
Yeah, but anymore, what are they trying to say that 2 plus 2 equals 5 now? So,
There's no correct answer. Let's get to the start of farmersonly.com. What is the earliest inkling of whatever happened that started this idea in your mind?
again, I worked with a lot of different types of businesses and clients, but at the time, I was doing agricultural marketing for livestock across the country, and I was talking to farmers and ranchers all the time. And I met this one of my clients. She was a farmer and raised livestock. She, on a personal level, she said that she just recently got a divorce, and she was terrified that she's never going to meet anybody new. How do I find? And I said, "What are you talking about? You're a great person. You'll meet somebody." She said, "How do you meet somebody working on a farm all day in an isolated area?" And I go, "Good point." Right. So, and she said she already knew everybody in her small rural community, at church and functions and this and that. And she was really scared. And then she just said to me, she goes, "Maybe I'll try online dating." And I said, "Well, I know that now remember, this is 15 years ago. And I said, I know online dating's taken off and it seems to be working for people. I've heard some success stories." And so didn't think too much about it. And about a couple months later, again, I was talking to her for business. And I said, "Oh, by the way, did you ever try that online dating?" And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh my goodness. I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "Well, most of the guys that contacted her from more urban areas and, bigger markets." And she goes, "They can't relate to the lifestyle of a farmer at all." Okay. And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, talking to this one guy, and he goes, 'Why don't we meet at Starbucks at, 7 tonight?'" She goes, "First of all, there isn't any Starbucks anywhere near me." Okay. And I have to go to bed early because I had to get up at 5 in the morning to take care of the animals. And he just couldn't relate to that at all, right?
Well, that sounds just like city life.
Yeah. That got my attention. And I started thinking about that is a problem. People that live in rural areas, the dating market is so small, combined with a lifestyle of a person and the conflict of people that live in the hustle bustle world versus kind of the country lifestyle just got my attention. So when I was talking to other ranchers and farmers across the country out of curiosity, I made a lot of friends. And I'd say, "Hey, Joe, are you married?" And say, "Yeah." And I said, "How'd you meet your wife?" And he'd say, "Well, she was my high school sweetheart." I talked to other people. They said, "No, I never met anybody." And the more it really got my attention, and I started diving into it even more. And it was a serious problem for a lot of people that live in rural areas, and especially the agricultural lifestyle. So I don't know what happened. I just said, "You know something? I'm going to start an online dating site for farmers and country people," right? When I started bouncing it off of friends and associates, they said, what do you know about farmers, and or online dating?" I said, "Well, I know there's a need for it." So I jumped in with both feet and put together the site. Thank goodness had an advertising agency that I had a lot of people on staff that just dabbled in technology. And so I it was fairly easy for me to put together. I did it on a shoestring budget. And when I launched it, here's the one thing I wanted to get across to your audience. I can't believe how many people told me that it was not a good idea. One very successful business person told me, he goes, Jerry, that's the stupidest idea you've ever come up with. About a year later, he was in the Chicago airport reading USA Today, and he called me up and he goes, Jerry, I'm sorry I said that because I'm reading a full page feature story about you in USA Today, so maybe it wasn't a bad idea.
Oh my god. That has to be an amazing feeling to see it come full circle like that. How did you get yourself in those early days to kind of keep going, keep pushing on and keep working on this when it felt like everybody in the world, except for the farmers that you talked to, was like, "All right, Jerry, what are you you know, is this a serious idea?"
Well, again, I knew there was a need. I mean, a serious need. Loneliness is a serious problem. It's devastating for a lot of people. So the way I market it, again, to break through the clutter, I always used a lot of like humor and like, I don't know if you've seen any of the farmers only commercials.
Of course.
It's the funniest thing because a lot of people, they would post them on YouTube or, they'd send it out virally and they go, I just saw the stupidest commercial I've ever seen. Check this out. And people, they're saying they were cheesy, they were this, that. In the meantime, they were sharing it with all their friends, and a lot of them started going viral. And it was always kind of slapstick humor to where I'd position the country against the city in situations. You'd have the country girl on a blind date with the city slicker type of thing in humorous situations, right? And or vice versa, the country guy dating a city girl, usually a blind date. And it lend itself for a lot of humorous situations.
And you're like an originator of viral content. And I feel like virality in the content world is something that so many brands, companies, people, agencies strive to achieve these days, but there's not like an exact formula to get something go viral. People just know that it can do amazing things for attention for your brand. Did you set out to create buzz, create that sort of viral nature?
Now, I think it happens by default because you see it now. I mean, 15 years later, people, they see a little clip on the internet and they go, oh, this is great. I got to share this with my friends, right? When people see something that's unusual, they like to share it. Remember, I mentioned that you're bombarded by so many messages a day. And remember, 15 years ago, they said four or 500 messages a day, right? Now it's thousands, with the internet. You don't even realize how many messages are trying to grab your attention each day, from driving down billboards, bumper stickers, signs. You go into a store, and there's 1,000 labels trying to get your attention. I mean, just walk through a supermarket. There's 1,000 branding messages trying to get your attention. That's not even mentioning radio or television. Trying to grab attention is difficult.
And there's true beauty in being unusual. And that's one of the things that I geek out about in this podcast. On that note, I think when people think of farmersonly.com, immediately some of the things that come to mind are the commercials and that jingle that is just
Right.
magical and immediately gets stuck in your head. So I'd love to touch on both of those. Where did this idea for doing commercials come from in the first place? Because not everybody wants to commit to that budget, but there's obviously some importance for you to do that.
I've also always been a very strong believer in television. I mean, I was in radio for at the beginning of my career. Became the sales manager of a radio station. Even though I was in radio, I believed in television because television hits all your senses, sight, sound, print, everything's involved. I think video is the most powerful form of messaging there is. Even with all my clients from a lot of different categories, I'd always find a way to get them on television. Okay. I mean, everybody, again, 20, 30 years ago, everybody was like, everything was newspaper. And, people were afraid to go on television, thought it was too expensive. But it's so much more powerful. And now television is going down. Well, it's not going down. It's so fragmented.
Right.
I don't even want to call it television anymore. It's still video.
It's things you're watching.
Yeah, you're on the internet. I mean, you're getting hit with video clips all the time. You go to a news site and you have to watch 5 or 6 seconds of a video clip before you can get to a story. Video is still very strong.
It is crazy compelling. There's a lot of upsides to it. Take us through crafting that first commercial and then, what turned into a series of commercials.
Yeah, the first commercial, it's a humorous story because I grew up in southern Ohio, kind of near the corner of Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio. And my parents were living down there still. And I had a real inexpensive little DVR, video camera, a couple $100 camera. Visiting my parents, I said, "Are there any farms left around here?" Because I grew up outside and not crazy rural, but kind of on the outskirts. And we had a lot of farms around us, right? But over the years, they were all disappearing. And it was that urban, sprawl. The suburbs just wiped out all the farmland. So my dad said, "Yeah, if you head down towards Indiana, you'll find more farms." So this is a crazy story, really. I said I gotta do a commercial for farmers only. I driving down the road, I see a farm, right? Okay. I pull in, go down a long gravel road. I pull in, and a guy comes out, and who's this stranger driving down my long driveway, right? Comes out, start talking to him, and start telling him how I just started a site for farmers dating. He goes, "Well, I've been married for a while now." And his wife came out. They were a younger couple, middle age. And all of a sudden it hit me. They had this big farm land with corn crops that were just harvested. So they were all just cut down. Off the cuff, I just said, "Hey, could your wife walk through the cornfields acting like she's lonely?" Okay.
As any random person who shows up to a house unannounced would ask.
Right. I mean, can you imagine this situation? It was just a thought. I just visualized it. She was attractive, and so I taped her, filmed her walking through the cornfield, and she's just holding some of the crops in her hand and just kind of like dazed off, looking at the sky. Then after I got done, I go, "Thank you so much," and blah blah blah. And then I said, Do you know anybody around here that has horses?" And he goes, "Yeah, old Bill up the hill, he's got some horses, right?" I drove up the hill and found his horse, his farm. I pull in again, total stranger. Okay. I said, "Hey," I explained my story. I said, "I'm putting together a TV commercial for farmers only. It's dating for farmers, blah, blah, blah." I said, "Can I get you to, I want to film your horse like he's talking, like, you're too young, but there is a TV show called Mr. Ed."
Yeah, well, the talking horse, right?
Yeah, right. I said, I want to shoot, your horse with a camera, right? So we got some peanut butter and put it on his gums, and he started yapping away, right? And I filmed a lot of different angles, and then I said, "What about, can I get your dog doing the same thing?" So we did it to the dog. Again, thanks. So I got this footage. I put together this commercial. First of all, I took this footage. I went into the production studio the production studio said, "Jerry, we can't use this. This is terrible. It's low quality." It was handheld. I didn't even have a tripod. It was like the original shaky cam. It's like now top Hollywood producers use the shaky cam look, right?
To look cool. You're ahead of your time.
So it was like it was low res, bad quality for television, shaky cam, and on and on. But this commercial, I put it together, and I'm telling you, for a few $100s, and it went viral. And the commercial, you can still find it on YouTube. But it starts off, it's the dog talking to the horse, and he goes, "Where's Jill?" And the dog said, "Oh, she's out lonely walking the cornfields again." Showed her walking through the cornfield. And then, I stopped at another cattle ranch, and I had these cows talking to each other, and they're all looking at the farmer holding his feed bucket, and the cows are talking to each other, and they're going, "Do you think Dave will ever find his true love?" And the other cow said, "Not hanging out with us all day." And then I had some animation, and this commercial, I mean, I'm telling you, it only cost a couple $100, and all of a sudden it started going viral. It was amazing. And then I got it on some television, real inexpensive spots, and they started going viral. Then it started getting media attention. Oh my goodness, that's a whole nother story. All of a sudden, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, they did a story on it the same day or the day before. Newsweek magazine contacted me, and they both hit. And then they went viral, not viral, but they got picked up by the AP wires and started spreading across the country. I had over 1,500 requests for interviews in 1 week. It was the most insane thing ever.
And if I was doing this podcast back then, I would have been 1,501. So you're lucky that you avoided another one there.
Yeah, it just kept on going. It was like every television network, nationally, the local broadcast stations did a story that got attention of the national, and then every magazine started contacting me, newspapers, radio stations. They even got my home phone number, somehow a radio station in Colorado, and they called and they go, "Is Jerry there?" My wife said, "No, he's not. He's at work." They go, "Okay, we'll try to contact him." And she said, "I don't think you're going to be able to get a hold of him. He's being bombarded by requests for interviews." And they go, "Well, why don't we just interview you?" Okay, and my wife has no clue, right? And so it was like a morning talk show, with the comedians on a country station in Colorado. They were planning on doing like a 1 minute interview. They had her on there for like an hour taking calls. She had no idea what she was talking about, but it was an insane period of time.
That is one of the best studies in bang for your buck I have ever heard. That commercial was like a lightning strike that started this crazy thunderstorm, hurricane, tornado of events that just created more and more buzz for you in the business. And about that jingle, which still to this day, I probably have the original jingle stuck in my head. How did that jingle come about?
Well, the had to come up with the line, "You don't have to be lonely at Farmers Only," right? Rhymes definitely help, right? And I believed in jingles big time because, well, you grew up in Northeast Ohio. I did marketing for the Lube Stop.
Oh, yeah.
I met them when it was just an idea. It was just a concept of the 10-minute oil change. Produced a jingle for them, and that became one of like the most recognizable jingles in the Northeast Ohio. And a couple other companies we did jingles for, and they always worked. It really helps you, brand recognition. So I always believed in jingles, so we had to have a farmers only jingle.
And did you craft the actual rhymes? I mean, is that something that came together pretty quick, or did that take tons and tons of crumpled up pieces of paper to get to?
No, that was like it was just I mean, what rhymes with only? Lonely. So that was like a 3-second decision, you know?
You just blew my mind right there.
And then that jingle has become it's definitely well known. I'd be willing to bet it's one of the more recognizable jingles in the country because you wouldn't believe how many. Again, this is 15 years ago, but it's still getting buzz out there. 15 years later, I remember Chappelle did a skit, and he incorporated FarmersOnly.com into a skit on Saturday Night Live. Farmers Only is always the punchline in a lot of national broadcast TV shows. The writers always somehow get Farmers Only in there. you know, Even on the Kardashians. Remember the TV show with the Kardashians?
I've never really heard of them.
Well, yeah,
Oh,
right.
no, I'm kidding.
Courtney, I guess there was this thing where she goes, "Yeah, I signed you up on FarmersOnly.com. I was watching an NBA game. This really blew my mind. You know how at halftime, I don't know if you're an NBA fan, but at halftime they'd have what's his name, Ernie Johnson and Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley.
Kenny the Jet.
Yeah, I'm watching this halftime show, and all of a sudden, Charles Barkley, he goes, "Did you see what's his name, Carmilla Anthony?" He goes, "Did you see Carmilla Anthony wearing a cowboy hat?" And Shaquille O'Neal said, "Yeah, I saw him." And he goes, and all of a sudden, Ernie Johnson starts singing. He goes, "You don't have to be lonely at farmersonly.com." All of a sudden, Charles Barkley goes, "Oh my goodness." He goes, "Farmersonly.com." He goes, "I saw those commercials and I thought it was a joke. So I checked it out. It's real." And Shaquille O'Neal goes, "Yep, it's real. I did the same thing. I went to the site to find out if it's real." I mean, when you got Shaquille O'Neal, Ernie Johnson, Charles Barkley talking about your business and singing the jingle, I mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
I would say so. Definitely. I mean, you found your way into the NBA, hanging with the Kardashians on SNL. I mean, what's sky's the limit?
Yeah, Ellen DeGeneres did a whole skit on it on her show, the Country Music Awards with this is years ago, but or what's her name, Kelly Underwood.
Carrie Underwood.
Carrie Underwood. She comes out with Country Singer and the opening of the awards. I mean, this is big time Country Music Awards. I'm terrible with names. Whatever his name is, he's on The Voice now.
Blake Shelton.
Yeah, Blake Shelton. He broke
Jerry,
up.
I'm here for you with the names.
Yeah, good.
Keep them going.
I guess he just broke up or something. And so Kelly Underwood and Paisley or whatever his name is, he comes out and they start singing. They go, "Blake, don't worry because you don't have to be lonely at farmersonly.com."
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I'm watching the Ohio State game in the national finals. It's like one of the highest rated ones ever,
Yeah, 2015, I think.
2015. And all of a sudden, they did a thing where Jimmy Kimmel did a contest who had the most creative poster in the stadium and for Jimmy Kimmel Live. And he chose the one that said, "Urban Myers met his wife on Farmers Only." Okay. Now, every time this stuff happens, my phone like lights up with text going, "Oh my God, I'm watching the game. How did you get how did you get in halftime on the Ohio State final, the national football champ?" And I go, I didn't set that up. Same thing with, the country music and every time that Hollywood, uses Farmers Only, everybody thinks I set it up. No, it's their writers, their creative people go, somehow they just throw it in there. Family Guy did a whole skit on Farmers Only. So again, there's like literally a lot of these, but it is kind of amazing how all based off an idea that, remember, some people told me it was the stupidest idea ever. you know? And again, back to your audience. I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs. When you think you have a good idea that's based on a need, and that's the important thing, not just everybody tries to build a better mousetrap and they 99.9% of them fail. But if you really have a good idea that you know there's a need for it, don't give up. Don't listen to friends, relatives, peers that might not know what they're talking about.
That's incredible advice. And it always makes me think back to the Jimmy V speech of don't give up, don't ever give up. That applies to so many things in life. And when you have a strong idea and a strong passion for an idea, something you're building, even if people are just telling you it's stupid, clearly that doesn't mean it can't pan out. And sometimes it could be the complete opposite and can just take off if you keep your mind right about it. Keep grinding away with that podcast as well. If you need help with your current or future podcast, you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com. Now, back to Jerry, where we get a little bit wild. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
The Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
Okay.
Wild Business Shout Out of the Week. This is where we talk about a campaign, a creative marketing approach that caught your attention. Obviously, you are someone who himself and with his company have seen a huge amount of buzzworthy nature and breaking through the clutter. And speaking about other brands, there's a particular commercial by Geico that kind of involves Fitbit. I don't know if it's officially or not, that really, really caught you and your wife's attention. Can you tell us about that?
I love Geico commercials. I've even told some of my friends I'd love to be on their creative team. I think the way that they do, okay. My wife, every day, she goes, "Oh my goodness." She wears this Fitbit. She goes, "Oh my, I only have 500 steps in today. I got to go for a walk." And she comes back later that night and says, I'm up to 12,000 steps. And she's so proud of herself every day. It's this Fitbit, how many steps? And all of her girlfriends talk about how many steps they got in. So I'm watching TV the other day, and all of a sudden, Geico commercial comes on. And again, they never show it's Geico in the beginning. You don't know what it is. And it's a lady sitting on a park bench with her dog, and there's some runners, some joggers jogging by. And she straps on her Fitbit onto her dog's tail. Okay. And this dog's tail is waving back and forth like real fast, so everyone's like a step. And then the dog runs around the park. Dog comes back. She goes, "Oh my God, I'm up to 40,000 steps. Woohoo." And she starts like high fiving the runners running by. What a great commercial. I just thought that was just unbelievable because what they do is they take a real life situation that you don't think that much about, put it in a creative way. And then it's Geico, it just hit you with the brand, but you definitely remember their name. In all marketing, most people on any decision they make of purchasing something, they usually narrow it down to two or three choices. And you better be one of those two or three companies, at least on the radar. If you're thinking about insurance, what are you going to think? You remember Geico, Progressive, which is the same corny stuff. And some of the other ones, they saw the growth of Progressive and Geico through corny creative commercials. So what now every insurance company is trying to go that route. State Farm went that route, to Liberty Mutual. But a lot of times I think that it's forced humor. I still like the purity of Geico.
Yeah, and they have such a crazy wide range of commercials. Like obviously they have the infamous Hump Day one. They have the ones with like the squirrels, the pig. I guess they've covered like every animal now. But there is just something so memorable about them, and they're just simple, not very time consuming to take in, not very hard to understand, but they're fun and corny, and people like fun and corny.
Hmm.
And I think most importantly, hopefully out of this interview, we can get you a job, whether it's on the team or as an advisor to Geico's marketing team.
There you go. I'd love to be in that creative room.
Let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. Are you ready for it?
Sure.
All right. Get your seatbelt buckled. Let's get wild. What is your biggest pet peeve?
Annoying people that don't realize they're annoying.
Sorry about that.
Not you, Max.
On another note, I love to talk about creativity. Something you said earlier when you were talking about how you started this whole rocket ship on a shoestring budget film the commercial for just $200 or $300. You're very, very resourceful. What's a quick tip you can share about being resourceful or finding bang for your buck in things?
I would say back to my original thought, you have to break through the clutter. If you spend $1,000 on marketing and everybody that you expose notes it, remembers it, versus you spend $100,000 on marketing and only 1% of people note it, even pay attention to it at all, it's exactly the same return on investment.
That's so true. And on another note, I'm sure you have endless stories from the millions of members and people whose lives you touch. The amount of people whose lives you've changed is just unbelievable. Can you share a quick story that's either heartwarming or surprising, something that comes to mind about members who have used farmersonly.com?
Yeah, I do have a million of them, but one of my favorites is talking to she told me a story that she went to Ohio State University and her husband went to Ohio State University and they actually worked out the same gym. She actually worked at the gym signing people in. He worked out there all the time too. So they probably ran across each other every day, but never met. And then she was a horse person. She was an equestrian, and he was a farmer. Okay, raised cattle and grew hay, and hay. And but he was an athlete. He's kind of a famous athlete at Ohio State. He was on the football team.
You're talking about Kirk Herbstreit.
No. Anyways, they met on Farmers Only. Isn't it amazing where they probably walked by each other every day, every other day for a long period of time, and they met on Farmers Only? But she told me one of the craziest stories. She was actually engaged to marry someone, but he was I call them city slickers, but he was a city slicker, and they were talking about after they get married, where they're going to live. And she wanted to head right out in the country and have a lot of land to raise horses. And he said, no, why don't we can live in the suburbs? We'll just keep the horses in the garage. And that's when she said, this is not going to work out. And she ended the relationship. Ended up on Farmers Only and madly in love, met the perfect guy. They got 2 or 3 kids now. I visited their farm out in the middle of nowhere. and, but they're madly in love. This is years and years ago. My slogan for Farmers Only was city folks just don't get it. And that kind of summed it up. This guy really thought that you could just keep the horses in the garage.
Well, my horses in the garage are very conflicted by that statement, but no, that really is amazing. And it's cool that even people who are living in a more city area or have lived there at some point in their life, there's a lot of success stories using farmersonly.com from that standpoint as well. So very, very cool all around. Jerry, you have created so much magic and touched so many people's lives. And it's so cool that it all goes back to hearing about this real need that's out there and finding a solution for it. This has just been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Where's the best place for people to connect online with either you personally or farmersonly.com, which I guess I might have just said?
Farmers Only, just go to farmersonly.com. You can, sign up for free, put up a profile and kick the tires and all that. So me personally, I'm a little bit off the radar, but you could always find me on LinkedIn probably.
There we go. And last thing, final thoughts. It could be a quote or a line or just any parting advice you have. Take us home here.
City folks just don't get it.
I don't get it. Thank you so much, Jerry, for coming on the show, sharing the unbelievable and inspiring farmersonly.com story. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning into another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the Wild Business Growth Podcast. You can also find us on Good Pods, and for any help with podcast production, you can check out MaxPodcasting.com. Until next time, Let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!